This weekend, President Trump is headed back to Texas to tour areas hit hard by Hurricane Harvey. Texas is among the states with the highest number, yes, of dreamers, children brought into the U.S. illegally by their parents. President Trump is considering scrapping the Obama-era program and says the decision will happen soon. You know, we've already heard could be any day now, except apparently not today. We will continue on, though, with the panel. Former Republican Congresswoman Nan Hayworth. She's on the board of the Independent Women's Forum and on the Donald J. Trump for President Advisory Board. Michael Morey, Democratic strategist and the former communications director for Senator Chuck Schumer. Evan Siegfried is Republican strategist and author of GOP GPS. And Reid Wilson, a national correspondent with The Hill. Thank you all, especially a Friday before the long Labor Day weekend. Hooray, extra bonus marks for that. Nan, look, I'll go out on a limb here and say that maybe some of the criticism leveled at the President and the First Lady about their visit was a bit unwarranted. I mean, maybe they didn't see every... I'm gonna go on the record and say, maybe they didn't see every moment. Maybe they did see some victims. But don't you want him to do that this time? Don't you want him to channel Vice President Pence?
Well, honestly, mostly what I want him to do, Paul, is what he's been doing, which is manage, as an executive, really the greatest hurricane natural disaster. I mean, the most massive one we've had in decades, if ever.
It could be the worst
in terms of the human scale and the cost, because of the level of development and the number of displaced businesses, families. I mean, it's and the amount of the cost. So he's done an extraordinary job from the cabinet level on down in his appointments to these key positions in FEMA and Homeland Security, in coordinating cabinet functions and assuring that everything goes as smoothly as possible from the federal level. That's the number one thing we need the president to do. There's no questioning his heart for these folks. The president has his own style. You know, he's been to Texas. He's been supportive. He's emphasized that the folks of Texas have all of the resources they'll need. I think, right?
Okay, but Michael, feel free. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, so I hope he does everything he didn't do the first time. In fact, I hesitate to say this for the sake of the vice president, but he should act more like the vice president. The vice president went out there, actually showed some empathy. He did what President Bush did before him. He did what President Obama did before him. He did what President Clinton did before him. He did what every president does, not only just what he's supposed to do, which is deliver disaster aid, make sure that all the federal agencies are working to save lives. But what he also needs to do, as the moral authority of the country, is to tell people, look, we're in this with you, and I'm here to help you, I'm here to support you, not talk about myself. Not go out there and talk about myself.
Size again.
Well, but, you know, that's, you know, he...
No, it's not okay, Ann.
Well, but, Mike, you know what? The president, people being themselves, actually...
The president's job is to look out for other people, not for himself.
When there's a dire situation, you actually want people to be themselves.
Here a little bit.
Thank you,
I've been a very vocal Trump critic, but what he did on Tuesday was actually smart. He did not go into the flood zone because it was still raining and the waters were still rising.
Exactly.
And I know that there are plenty of people who would, if the president was damned if he did, damned if he didn't. There are plenty of people who would criticize him if he didn't go down. And the optics of
it's not so much.
But no, I understand about what you're saying. Well, he talked about his crowd size, but that's just his natural way of talking.
But that doesn't
and I don't think that anybody in Houston cares.
No,
they care
exactly.
not whether or not they talk about.
Let me pick up on one other point that Nan touched on a little bit. In an administration in which a lot of the president's picks for personnel have been criticized, scrutinized for their ties to industry or their relative lack of experience in their area, I've been talking to a lot of emergency managers lately, and Brock Long, the head of FEMA, is universally respected. Democrats, Republicans alike. This is a guy who knows what he's doing. He's got a long history. The president clearly made a good pick here, and FEMA, this is not a Michael Brown situation. FEMA's actually running pretty well right now.
Okay, and having said that, let's put a pause on that for a minute, because there is going to take a lot more leadership to come, whether it's on emergency response or, quite frankly, at Congress to try and get that aid package through. I want to talk a moment, though, about DACA. And Nan, what does it mean when you say, I love the dreamers, but you're still thinking of cutting them loose, essentially? And remember, this is tied to Harvey. We have people in shelters right now that were terrified to go to the shelter, terrified to put their hand up about who they are, and basically having the White House said, yeah, you may not even be eligible for aid. That's a separate and aside from dreamers.
And but there's a long, as you know, said, come to the shelters.
Okay, but that's a long way in terms of
lives. Right.
What would you like to see?
The president just alluded to the fact that he's, number one, he's going to make a decision on DACA this weekend. He said maybe Sunday, maybe Saturday, so that would be as soon as tomorrow. And he also alluded to having, again, once more he said, having a heart for this. I don't remember his exact expression, but it was about a half hour ago.
We've heard, I'm sorry, I mean, I'm going to get Michael in here and just say, what does having a heart mean? What does that mean for the Democrats?
Well, look, the president said he had a heart on a lot of things. He said he was an ally of the LGBT community, and he clearly showed that he was not. So I don't take the president's words at face value. Look, the president and I think Republicans across the country have this is going to be a major moment for them. If the president comes out and rescinds DACA, what is going to wind up happening is the Republican Party is going to fissure. There is going to be a major problem within that party because these are kids. These are kids who by no choice of their own came to the United States of America, are integrated into our society, are productive members. They're friends with my kids in the classroom. These are kids who went to college, who have good jobs, who are productive citizens in this country.
Evan, and yet there are segments of the party that say no way.
Paul Ryan has come out in favor of keeping DACA. The same with Jeff Flake. If you actually look at what would happen politically to Republicans, this would be the worst signal we could send to Hispanic and Latino voters in the country.
Reid,
hold on.
I don't have a little bit of time. One final thought.
I would just say that 44% of Latino voters are millennial, and they don't already connect with the GOP.
Reid.
Right, and the politics of this are very delicate. How is the news media, how are Americans going to perceive deportations and DACA and Dreamers? Are they thinking about MS-13 and gangs? If that's the case, good for Republicans. If they're thinking about kids who are getting deported, honor roll students, altar boys at their local church being deported, that's a terrible thing. And those are the kinds of stories that are going to be on the front page of newspapers.
The president can accommodate DACA and MS-13 action.
Sorry, I have to leave it there. Let's pray that they get creative at the White House on this. Donald Trump may be tweeting praise about his new chief of staff, but the Washington Post apparently isn't buying it. We'll look at what sources tell the paper about the president's tense relationship with John Kelly when we come back.